Renegade Squadron will be giving away an Avenger Titan starter pack in June. If you want to enter, all you have to do is like, subscribe, and leave a comment on this or any video we release from now until June 30th. You will get one entry for each individual video you comment on this month, and winners will be picked and announced on July 1st. I guess we'll get started. So anyways, my name's Lt-Reyne. You're watching the Renegade Squadron podcast, and I'm joined today by Goloith, Jolly, and Kric. Goloith, can you tell me maybe a little bit about yourself and your history in the game?
Yeah, so I've been playing from the very start and really got involved with a lot of the combat side of the things, and just kind of just been here for a while, kind of veteran backer. So, yeah.
All right, Jolly, how about you?
Yeah, not quite as long as Golo, but basically started in late 2013, and yeah, been into the combat side for quite a bit. But yeah, really enjoying it.
And Kric, what's your background with the game?
I'm actually I actually started a lot later than them. I was started in 2016, and my main background is just in the FPS side of things, and I really enjoy.
You really enjoy what? You cut off there?
Enjoy that.
Oh, okay. And I'm Lt-Reyne, and even though all of you definitely don't know me, I've been a backer since I think 2016, like Kric. But I've just, I guess, recently come back to the game. I like being a combat pilot, and that's pretty much it. I just learned from these guys how to do what I do. So, yeah, and I guess today we wanted to talk about some of the stuff from the Inside Star Citizen. We're going to go over some of the combat changes that came with 391 as opposed to 390, and some of the things that go on with the new player experience. So I guess we'll get started with the Inside Star Citizen. They talked about Salvage, and it kind of went into a little bit of detail. It kind of felt like, to me anyways, it felt like they said a whole lot without saying anything at all. We didn't really get any new timelines or anything like that. It was very vague as far as that goes. I don't know. Is anyone here interested in that sort of gameplay loop, or?
I mean, yeah. I mean, like mining, cargo running. I mean, there's always kind of that emphasis to kind of try everything this game kind of has to offer. I mean, with a new factor like salvaging coming in, of course, there's that kind of want to kind of experience it for yourself. Now, from what I kind of saw from the ISC, it seems like it was almost just more so a concept kind of thing. It's almost like they've kind of got an idea on paper, but it seems like not a lot functionally is working behind the scenes on it.
And I think, yeah, that's right. I mean, I originally bought a Vulture. I think I was really keen on the idea of, salvaging stuff. And from what I can see, it really feels at the moment that salvage, they talk about the ground, the components to, or the building blocks to do salvage, but I think they're, still, maybe 6 to 12 months away from demoing something. Who knows? I mean, they talk about, components and the heat system, which will probably affect a lot of the combat as well at some point. But yeah, it still feels like it's more of a concept than anything.
Yeah, I mean, they talked a little bit about how they're still going through the process of sort of writing down all the things they need to do before it even gets approved or anything. So
I actually thought it'd be further along, to be honest. We've been talking about salvage for ages. I really thought that salvage was much further along. But
it was on the roadmap. I mean, we saw it. I forget what patch we saw it. It was like 3.4 or 3.5 or something like that. It was on the roadmap to. It was earlier than that. Like that was I think when it first kind of
when it went on around.
Yeah.
But it was supposed to be in the game for 3.8, right?
Yeah, it was like right around that time. They just keep pushing it off and off and off, and it seems like from what we kind of saw, it was kind of underwhelming with like why it would even go on the roadmap. But we never.
Yeah. Golo, you're one of the more experienced like combat pilots in the game as a whole. And I know like you probably don't have any interest in going out and salvaging ships yourself. Maybe you do, but
So funny story. So when I first backed this game, I kind of was thinking I wanted to do something like industry. I mean, I played a lot of EVE Online, big multi-boxer. I mean, used to run with, my ships, kind of my looter scooters, and I was kind of thinking about doing kind of some industry stuff, because it's like PvP was always that thing you always kind of did in the evening, but there was always 80% of the time was doing some PvE to afford the combat ships. So I always had that kind of in mind. But yeah,
Right.
so yeah, I've actually picked up a miner and a salvager, but we'll see how much I
Okay.
use it.
That's interesting. I guess. Well, so what I was going to ask you was like just from a combat pilot perspective, what do you
Yep.
think that Salvage, if they implemented it, say next week, would actually bring to the game for you?
Oh, I
as
mean,
as a combat
it would
pilot?
legitimize a lot of what we do in the persistent universe, and that is find targets, blow them. Because not everything's going to have cargo, right? Some of the valuables are the parts of the ship itself, whether it's components or just any type of scrap or whatnot. It provides this value of reward of killing a player. Well, I guess not just a player, but there's a reason, right? We've been doing it, and now we have a great reason to do so.
Right. I think that pretty much sums that up, right? Like that right now, it's just, and I think part of the reason people get mad, like the people that just want to do mining or salvage or hauling get mad simply because there is no reward for us killing them, right? Which it's fun for us to see a big explosion at the end of our little raid on somebody's Kric or whatever, but there's no actual reward at the end, and so I think they see it as just trolling or griefing.
Exactly. It's more than that.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is Salvage opens up potentially the pirating aspect of the game. I mean, again, like Dolo said, I came from Elite Dangerous, so for me, I didn't want to kill traders. I mean, it was bad business, right? I mean, if you just kill everything, those people just dry up. But if people know that you can, salvage components off their ships or take cargo, properly off their ships, stuff like that, it just makes for a way better game loop. And I'd log in at night, play some PvP or do whatever the hell it was, kill some stuff, and then fund the killing stuff with the legitimate piracy or the salvaging components. And Elite Dangerous made it really easy with drones. So you'd have a ship, you'd kill something, or a pilot would drop 10% of their cargo, and you'd send your drones out, collect the stuff, and move on. And it created this lovely little ecosystem where people felt there was some danger as a trader, and other people had chased these traders around, and it was great fun. And the last thing you wanted to do is actually kill somebody, because that person would you'd lose everything. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think the only danger to traders right now is 30Ks.
Well, exactly.
Oh yeah.
That's where the adrenaline rush comes in. You just put all your money into a cargo run, and fucking you're just waiting for the 30K to show up.
Getting griefed by the game, not the players, right? Like, great.
Yeah.
One person you can't get back on 6 servers.
Well, there's another thing I kind of wanted to touch on here too, and it was based on a comment that I read, right? And they basically pointed out that that Pappy had quoted, "From there, we work on getting all items placed in the ships, and obviously with our catalog of ships, it takes a while." And they noted that that putting an emphasis on ship sales and all that stuff, like just putting new ships into the game and having backers pay for them. Now we have all these ships, and that's kind of turned the process of all this development around Salvage and possibly other systems that are going to be in the game, makes it a lot longer, right?
Oh yeah, the ability to, I mean, you're constantly chasing the rabbit, I guess, right? Because every new ship you create has to be a ship that has to be, updated and whatever's. But I know that I think in one of those comments as well, they mentioned that every ship that's built in the last 18 months, I think it was, has all this sort of stuff taken into account, like the the component storage, the piping systems, that kind of stuff is all something that's being taken into account now. So hopefully they're getting smarter around that.
Yeah, I think they're just not functioning right, and so like you see all these panels in your ship, and they kind of just look like a texture pack laid over it. But what it actually is those panels will be able to be opened, and those screens that are kind of all around your ship, like for example in the Mantis, you see a couple of screens above a couple of what would look like you should be able to open panels, right? And once I think Salvage is in the game, those panels will be able to be opened, and that'll tie into engineering as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that also. Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Kric.
I think that kind of leads to like a great example would be the Vanguard. I think you can even just look at that ship right now. That most of the components, like you can see the quantum drive underneath the stairs. You can see, the shields on the side and stuff like that. And it's just the little things that they've kind of started to kind of put in there. We just kind of hope that, as other ships kind of move along, that they kind of start to look not only the same as kind of like the same functionality the Vanguard is kind of having right now, but, with a little bit more functionality as, things are starting to progress.
So this kind of leads into a bigger discussion, I think, a little bit of, right, we're able to replace a lot of these components and do X, Y, Z, but does any of it matter? And the reason I say that is the way our ships are currently designed for combat has to dramatically change in order for any of this to mean really anything. Because if, we're essentially, most of our engagements are, right, you're finally trying to wear that shield down, you got the shield down, and then ships just melt, right? And because we're just so shield heavy, essentially what happens is you're not going to have a ton of reaction time, right? If you got an engineer that needs to get from point A to point B to repair it or swap out components, they're going to be dead before that happens, simply because all the ship's effective hit points are in the shields and not the hull. There's no way to really react to that unless they add a whole nother, layer of hull HP. Supposedly armor is supposed to fill that, but that would have to be significant enough for them to know whether they need to, react to go to those places to change out this component.
I mean, you take the example of, like you say, you're in a Kric, a hammerhead, whatever, you lose a shield face. By the time the person picks up the component, I'm assuming it's going to be physicalized, so they have to take it from somewhere to somewhere. Like you say, it could be all over, right? I mean, so like it's going to, all of a sudden now you're having to add, like you say, the ability to have armor. Are we now going to double the time it takes to kill a ship, which is already unwieldy as it is? I don't understand how they're going to implement something like that and make it effective. Yeah. Maybe in big ships, it's more of a thing than it is in small ships. But
it's like that too. Okay, so if you start taking armor damage, is a component still safe then? Because if this component's still safe by that point, well, what's the point, right? Are you just going to sit there waiting for the armor to crack and then you're going to swap it out right then and there and pray your ship survives, long enough to hull? And this is why having more of a hull HP centric kind of model instead of a bunch of these shields is more of kind of a better way to go, because it gives players time to react. You can see that, okay, I've lost a component, maybe an engine component or something like that. You can see the HP slowly ticking down to know where you need to react.
Yeah, I think so. With that, that means they're going to have to probably implement armor before they implement engineering, right? Or at the same time, at the very least. And I think that with that armor update, they will reduce the HP of most shields, simply because, yeah, you're right. Like, if you look at just a ship like the Prowler that just came out, right? The shields on that thing are insane. And it's supposed to be like a heavily armored ship. So I think like all these, especially these like size 2 shields and stuff like that, are going to end up being reduced in health by a significant amount. The jump from a size 1 to a size 2 shield is like, oh, here's 7,500 and then here's 76,000 HP, which is just crazy.
So there's another way of thinking about this, and then looking at other games that do it. I mean, again, I use Elite Dangerous as a sort of model. Elite Dangerous has a shield pool, but as part of that, as part of the targeting mechanism in Elite, as an example, you can sub-target components, which we sort of have rudimentary component sub-targeting now. So you can sub-target the engines, I guess, or the front of the ship or the nose. So in Elite Dangerous, you can actually sub-target components, so shield generators, weapons. You can do all sorts of really cool stuff like that. So to Goloith's point, if someone's sub-targeting your jump drive, as an example, to try and stop you from jumping, and you can see that jump drive on your engineering panel getting hit and taking damage and going down, that's where you would send your engineering crew to come and fix your jump drive to get out if you're in a trading ship. Whereas opposed to, if you're in a frontline, capital ship and one of your shield generators is being sub-targeted, your left shield generator is being sub-targeted, that's where the guys need to go. And when that shield facing fails, there's a guy there ready to change it. That, to me, sounds like good gameplay.
Yeah, they would definitely need something similar to that with the current heavy shield model that they have.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, to be able to get that feedback to see that that's where they've been being hit.
Well, and here's something weird too, is that I've noticed over the last couple days. Just when I fight people, they can get down to like 10% health before they die, right? Like you can just lay into them, but you actually have to damage because just in 3.8, right? It was like anything under 65, one shot could potentially kill you if it was the right shot. And now it feels like that's not possible.
Well, a lot of that's tied to the way alpha weapons work, whereas with Gatlins and laser repeaters are kind of the new flavor of the few months, I should say now. It's the fact that you've got concentrated damage. Concentrated damage from sledges, you could hit that one component, AE, or example given whatever, of the nose on a Gladius, and it'd go pop. Now you're damaging the wingtips. Now you're damaging nose. There's a lot more spread of damage throughout the body of the ship. So you're seeing the whole, I guess, percentage of health decreasing versus just one individualized location on the ship, which is the nose usually.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And so I guess I actually have a question for you about that, because if that's the case, and I know that like shield penetration is obviously a big part of this, but like, why aren't sledges necessarily good anymore, right? Like, if you can take somebody's shield facing down and then you can just alpha them with one shot at 65% health, why wouldn't that still be the way to go, rather than trying to get them down to 7%?
I mean, you still see people running, like Eddie, for example, another great pilot from 2 Linear. He is very good with sledges. He still uses them very well in his Arrow or Gladius. You just got to be a really good shot. You still can use them. I mean, that's the thing, is that a lot of people just kind of gave up on sledges. They're still really powerful in the right situation.
Okay.
And I think like, and again, I'm not really. I do remember reading in one of the patches that they released recently that shield penetration has been either reduced or removed. So while we still see some shield penetration, I think that's more on the sides, because everyone's pushing shields completely to the front now. But you've taken sledges have taken a nerf in alpha damage. So with a I think they've taken 100 points of of DPS off the top, I think, per gun. So, there are guns that probably do slightly more DPS over time versus a sledge, which is, now probably doing slightly less DPS over the same amount of time. So, like you say, you've got to be a really good shot and really be consistent, like some of the guys that still use them. But ultimately, people have just moved on to something that applies more damage over time.
Right.
It's an interesting. I mean, it's again, this is all part of a discussion around reactionary approach to balancing weapons, shields, that kind of stuff. So a lot of people complained about mass drivers for whatever reason, and what did CIG do? They nerfed them. So, but people still use them. It's just not as effective.
Right.
I mean, we've seen a lot of weapon variety this patch, that's for sure. I mean, at the start, I noticed a lot of people used, neutron repeaters. They were kind of the flavor for a while. Then the people started using scorpions and yellow jackets for a while, and now it's kind of shifted to attritions, right? So it's just like it's ever evolving. But to me, that's better than just having one simply good weapon. I look at it this way: like you've got your scores for the jousters, you've got your attritions for people that get nice and close. You've got your badgers for PvE, or neutron repeaters for PvE. There's just a lot of weapon variety, kind of based on the situation where that simply did not exist before. So,
do you think that and to sort of tie this back into salvage and engineering, right? Do you think that weapons like the sledges will be more favored by people who are trying to blow ships up with the intent to salvage them after, or disable ships with the intent to salvage them after, simply because they can
you could
disable a ship?
I mean, if you could sneak up on somebody and shoot them in the engine and knock their engines out. I mean, I've had that happen a few times in the prior patch. You lose an arrow as an engine, you're just dead in the. I can definitely see that happening. Obviously, people that are trying to, salvage or disable ships are probably pack hunting, so they can kind of afford to bounce out if it's a little bit hot, just to try and, so you can kind of play with your food, I guess you can say more. There's more people there in the fleet. But yeah, I mean, I definitely could see, people doing, or like turrets, for example. We're going to be seeing turrets hopefully getting a buff soon. So, and who knows, maybe they might make turrets targetable. You want to just centralize damage on that turret, sledges might be excellent at that. We just don't know yet.
Right. And I think one of the interesting pieces of gameplay that we've been touching on in Arena Commander recently is the whole idea of distortion weaponry, right? The ability to if you play that scenario out into the PU, taking something like an Avenger or a Warlock, doing distortion damage, which still doesn't feel like it's working the way it should be. Taking that ship in a pack, doing that distortion damage, taking a shield down, once a shield face goes down, taking that shield face down, EMPing that ship and completely disabling it. That to me is a great, and then you've got the fighters that come in and either take out components or turrets or do whatever they need to do to mop up once that big shield's out of the way. That's a whole set gameplay that we haven't, that's right for pirating, right? That literally every pirate or every pirate fleet should have some ships with EMPs and distortion damage.
Right. So I think, I mean, what I take from all this and the implementation of salvage and engineering is just that not only is it going to make, add a whole other couple of like really in-depth gameplay loops to the game, but it's going to make combat a lot more fun and engaging, right?
There'll be a purpose to combat, right? Besides just killing each other over and over and over again. You'll focus on traders and you'll start to make money as a group without, because at the moment combat's a zero game, actually it's a negative gain experience, right? So you die, you go back, you respawn, you pay money to get your ship out. Now you add the salvage component in there, you fly around as a fleet, you take out a trader, you bring in a what's its name, a ship like a Mantis to put up a net, or you go fishing, you catch a target, you bring it in, you salvage the componentry off that target, off to the bank, you get paid. Holy shit, rinse and repeat. Really cool.
Yeah.
I think there's also another thing about this, though. There isn't just the components portion of it. They also talked about the siphoning of fuel. You can also siphon oxygen and water out of the things as well.
Yeah.
I think that's really crucial because now, we have to rely on water. We have to rely on oxygen and, fuel. You're always going to need fuel if you're flying around space. So it comes with also the idea that, if you are in the salvage game, you may not have to rely on purchasing fuel or rely on purchasing oxygen or rely on purchasing water if you are taking it from other ships. There's also that gameplay loop of the fact that, once you do this, there isn't just a profit reward, but there's also a resource reward as well.
Yep. You imagine having a Kraken sitting up there. You go out there, you grab a fleet, a Gemini or a fuel tanker. You basically you take that, you siphon all that fuel from that fuel tanker, take it back to your Kraken. I mean, fuel's going to be expensive, right? At some point, we're paying for it every time we hit a pad right now. Imagine having to take care of an entire fleet. You'll be targeting those fuel tankers, man. I could bet you, right? And you're taking that fuel back to your Kraken, sticking it in the Kraken's tanks, and you're basically a floating bloody petrol station. Rearm, resupply, all that kind of shit's all taken care of on your mobile home base. It's going to be fucking glorious, to be honest.
Oh yeah, no, I'm excited. I can't wait until I don't have to go and make money. Oh, hold on, make money and then run around the entire solar system trying to find where I can buy my fucking guns. We can just go, disable a ship and then salvage the guns off of it, and I'll put them on mine.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that's how it works, right? Like, it'd be really nice to be able to actually just pull those components right out of the ship, right? Like, oh, here's a nice quantum drive, cool. Who in the fleet could use that right now, right?
Exactly. I mean, the sky's the limit, right? But knowing CIG Tier 1 is, as they said, right, they're going to get the pipe system working, do some basics, and hopefully they'll do like Salvage. They'll just keep building and building on it, and we'll get some a decent head of steam on it and make it into something pretty amazing.
Yeah. I guess that pretty much dries up the salvage topic. We could probably sit here and talk about all the implications of adding salvage and engineering to the game for hours, but they haven't really given us a whole ton of information. So I guess I wanted to talk about some of the combat changes that we've seen in 3.9.1.
Yep.
From my perspective, anyways, there isn't a whole lot. They nerfed EMPs, right? And they introduced the Cutlass Blue. I think there's a couple other things, like Golo mentioned earlier, right? We're seeing a lot larger weapon variety now and things like that. But what do you guys think of the way they nerfed EMPs and sort of their reaction to that? Golo?
Man, I think it's awesome. I mean, it's the fact that an EMP bow could sneak up to 890 jump with full shields and nuke them, and it's now disabled. It's just ridiculous. I think we all want EMPs to have a purpose. We just don't want it to be so cheesy, and they've done a pretty good job of that. I think there's still a lot of concern around the Sentinel. It currently is literally, in my opinion, the best fighter in the game, because it's got some of the best guns. It's got really good missiles. It's got that best EMP in class. And then you look at a ship like the Saber Raven, which is absolute garbage, right? It's got 2 EMPs that are just puny, and it's got a horrible weapon loadout. It's got no missiles. It's only got 2 size 3 guns. And it's just kind of a head scratcher, like, okay, why do we have a ship that's got so many good things going for it that it's literally outclassing all the other Vanguards? I mean, who would want to own a Warden at this point?
Right.
Nobody.
Nobody.
Yeah, no.
And it's not just as simple as, well, we should buff the Warden. Well, in my opinion, I think, a person could say, okay, this is the dogfighting variant. maybe that's the one ship that gets to have the size 5 mount. All the other Sentinels maybe get like a size 4 mount. That'd be one way to add some balance, I think, and kind of decrease the effectiveness of potentially the Sentinel, because it is a monster, guys. It's just absolute monster.
Right. And I mean, like, CIG mentioned last week or the week before in the Q&A that, oh, well, the Vanguard Sentinel is, you know, in the top 5 across the board, right? So like they recognize
it would be top 1 if everyone didn't missile and kill it. Like literally, the reason why it might just be top 5 and not, you know, the best on any type of metrics is because people are literally going after them. Everybody. Same thing with the Bandit Defender. If CIG says, oh, the metrics tell otherwise, it's because the entire server in that AC match is literally going after that Banu or Sentinel.
Right. As soon as it's seen, everybody's just like, yeah,
Exactly.
everybody just jump on this, kill it,
I mean,
get
some
it
people are just some people get so sick of it, they're, you know, hopping into Gladiators, Retaliators, Eclipses, whatever you can bring into AC to nuke as quick as possible. I mean, they're even swapping ships mid-match to keep nuking them.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is the Sentinel is actually a cheaper ship than the Harbinger, than some of the other, you know, Vanguard variants. But on paper and in practice, it's essentially the best ship in the game.
Yep.
Why? Because of the EMP, right? I mean, you've got EMPs, you've got missiles. I mean, I could understand if the ship had a much smaller complement of missiles or the EMP was less. I mean, this gets back to the role that it's intended for. This was a, you know, long-range EM warfare ship, right? There has to be some downside to owning this ship, you know, with a Harbinger.
Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. A Harbinger is an example. You've got 3 missiles or 3 torpedoes. With a Vanguard Warden, maybe the hull is thicker, right? Maybe like you say, the gun is bigger because it's actually the long range, you know, fighter variant or a heavy fighter. Again, this is my bugbear about how ships are built, what they're intended for, how they're balanced. And at the moment, I think CIG is doing it based on every time they sell something, they just want to hype the thing up to the absolute max. The Prowler example, right? Yeah. You could literally see the writing on the wall that they were going to decouple the turret from the main guns. They didn't. Why? Because it probably sold like hotcakes, and I bet you Sentinels right now are selling like hotcakes. So why nerf it? Why would you turn around and say, hey, we're going to make these changes and potentially impact sales? It'll be done when things are a little quieter.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, in that Starsives in Live, I think it was, they mentioned that they want to improve fixed in some way or make fixed more competitive. If that's true and they're able to achieve that, holy cow. If you think a Sentinel is powerful now, it's going to be, you're going to hear, you know, Disturbed, Indestructible going on in the background. It's just going to be, oh my. I actually picked up a Sentinel upgrade, well, a few of the, you know, Vanguard upgrades, just simply because it's like, if they do that, oh my God, that thing is going to be a monster. Way more than it is now.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. And I see this with other ships too, not just the Sentinel, but like the like misclassification of a ship, right? So the Sentinel is essentially a heavy fighter at the moment, right? When it should be an E-War ship. And you look at other ships like the was it 325A says it's an interdiction ship, but it doesn't have any interdiction mechanics, right? So things like that just are confusing. It doesn't make any sense. And I think they need to figure out a way to class these ships appropriately so that, you know, maybe that can alleviate some of this discussion. At the same time, I do agree with you guys, though, that the Sentinel having such a strong EMP and then also being like essentially this heavy fighter class doesn't make sense no matter how you class it, right? Or what you say about it. But yeah.
Yep.
Just
completely agree.
Yeah, tell me what the ship does, right? Because the 325A is a fighter, right? Unless they add interdiction mechanics to it or interceptor mechanics to it, it's just a fighter, right? I don't care how fast it is or anything like that. It's a fighter because it doesn't have those mechanics in the game or like attached to it. Which kind of, I guess, brings us to the Cutlass Blue, which has been added to the game. I guess, Jolly, what do you think? Like, how does the Cutlass Blue change anything at all? Does it add something to the game? Do you think that wasn't there before?
Blue flashing lights, I guess. I mean, that was the coolest thing. I think I remember when we were sort of all running around testing it. The first thing I wanted to do is like press T and hit the blue flashing light. I mean, just trying to stop being funny for like a half a second. I remember when there was talk back in the day when they were concepting out the red, the blue, the black, and they talked about, you know, more shield generators for the blue. It's going to be a more powerful, you know, like it's going to have some more defensive capabilities as a police interceptor or two shield generators, that kind of stuff. Now that didn't happen, and what we got instead was this what do they call it? The quantum dampener component.
1,000 meters.
Yeah, oof. Like 1,000 meters on a quantum dampener. I mean, anything, literally anything, can get away to beyond 1,000 meters and effectively be out of the range. The Mantis has a range of something like 20,000.
I thought it was
8,000. Okay, so, but you know, it's 8 times as much as
still not enough.
And yeah, exactly, and still not enough. So in the end, what does it bring to the table right now? Pretty much nothing. I mean, I hate to say it. I like the color. I like the little flashy lights, but yeah, gameplay-wise, nothing.
Just yeah, and I'm kind of on that page too. It's just another Cutlass with the dampener on it that we already have ships that can dampen in the game. And it's not other than that, I don't think it actually has anything that the other Cutlasses don't, right? Does it have the same guns as the black? Does anyone know?
It's got some distortion weaponry by default on it. I think I remember when we were testing it out, so a distortion weapon, but again, it's like literally, it's a couple of size.
I mean, here's the thing, right? You think about the price, and you know, some guy. I made that Cutlass Blue video that we had, and it was, you know, pretty enjoyable. You know, is what I was told. But there was this reoccurring comment of, well, why should I own this other Cutlass Blue over, you know, like a Freelancer? You know, that's got 2 shields. This thing only has 1 medium shield. So it's just like, what reason? It's like I can't really provide a reason to really own this over, you know, maybe like a Miss Freelancer or something like that. It's for that price point of, I think it was like 175. It's not worth it. I mean, did I cover it? Yes, but is it worth it? Probably not.
Right. Well, and I mean, like, we're gonna cover new ships that come into the game, right? Like you have to do that because there's going to be people that are interested in them regardless of if it's great or not. But yeah, I think that's kind of hit the nail on the head, right? You just go look at that comment section. Is there any other like noticeable like combat changes that happen? I mean, we talked a little bit about the weapon variety that's going on. Do you think that's a good thing overall, Golo?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's enjoyable doing, you know, something other than just, you know, pulling the trigger and wearing my triggers out of my sticks. You know, I sent my one Delta grip in to get the trigger, you know, fixed, just simply because I was just crunching on it too much, just pulling the trigger. And hopefully CIG gets rid of that stupid requirement that all, you know, some of these cannons are single, you know, semi-automatic. You know, it's okay to have guns that are, you know, more than semi-automatic, even though they're a cannon. It's not even realistic to do that. You know, even cannons in real life, you hold the trigger, they keep shooting.
Right.
Because who wants to hold the trigger? I mean, imagine having to shoot a Vanguard. I mean, I swear I broke how many triggers on other, joysticks simply because I had to keep pressing that damn trigger.
Fucking sledges.
The other thing I think is worth sort of mentioning, I guess, is we've gotten to a point now where, I think they've lost that. I mean, I know they're doing nothing with shields at the moment, right? And signed distance fields are going to be the Jesus patch for shields. But right now, shields are essentially like you might as well not have shield faces. You might as well just disable it and leave it the way it is, because right now, anybody that knows anything about fighting literally just sticks the shields full front and they run 325% on their front shields.
Absolutely.
And as long as you keep the front of your ship pointing in the direction of the guy that's shooting bullets at you, it ends up just being a fucking DPS race. And that's it was bad enough in 3.82 and 3.9. This has just accentuated the fact. And to Goloith's point about now we've got this variety of weapons, people are tailoring those weapons to do the most damage on that 300% shield.
Yep.
It's sad. That's a negative for me.
And there's that's the thing, right? When you think about combat, we think about positioning, stuff like that. And right now the meta is literally throw your shields to the front and try and out aim your opponent and try and take that front shield down. Whereas before, if the shields were balanced, there was that kind of incentive of, okay, I can't just take every shot to the face. Otherwise it's going to crack and I'm going to die. So what I need to do is I need to push in and put myself in a position where I can shoot them, but they can't shoot me. And that logic has completely gone out the door because they throw shields to the front and it's changed combat behavior. And now a person would say, well, if we put shields to the front, shouldn't that incentivize people to try and get in and shoot them in the back? Well, this kind of goes to another big problem that we see with kind of the way the shields are and kind of where that pip, because essentially what happens is the pip is essentially based off of the center of mass, well, not center of mass, but kind of the midway point on a ship. And even if you outposition an opponent, let's say, for example, I almost get like behind them and I shoot, the auto gimbal essentially shoots the middle of the ship, which is still covered by the nose. So that creates that other, problem. We almost need subsystems that are closer towards the rear, just so we can actually hit that rear facing to even make that worth it. You know what I mean? To push on an opponent that's got shields to the front. So that's a whole nother topic. We don't have to go down that road right now, but it's behavior has changed because of these shields to the front.
Right. That's I guess just with like moving or adding more subsystems or things like that. I think it would be just beneficial to remove auto gimbal and make fixed weapons viable again.
I don't think you're gonna see people removing auto gimbal. I mean, it's made it enjoyable for a lot of people. I'd say, probably most backers. But it's one of those things that we just need to have more subs targeting options or they just need to rework the shield so that when we're aiming at the pip and we're behind the target, it's actually hitting behind the back shield. Yeah, it's hitting the back shield. I mean, the only way to really do that is if you target the engines. But here's the thing. If there's any type of desync or whatnot, or the target's moving really quickly, chances are a lot of those shots are going to miss. You can essentially think of it like a triangle, right? If you look at a Gladius, the highest hit chance is the nose, if you're targeting the nose. And then as you work towards the back of the ship, your hit chance starts to go dramatically down. And it's very, very low, targeting the rear engine on like a Gladius or an Arrow. It just is, because most of your shots are going to be trailing. They're going to be missing. So you're still better off aiming at that normal pip, the default location. But if we had some way, maybe for example, there was a cooler or something that was just a little bit further back on the ship, that might be just enough for us pilots that know how to outposition our opponents to actually hit that rear shield that has no HP to crush them by outpositioning them. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and I'm curious. I'm actually curious again about your opinion on this, Golo, because you said, you know, like shots will be trailing if you sub-target engines and things like that. But then, you know, we also have this sort of problem of people backstrafing.
Yeah, that's a flight model issue. Yeah, definitely.
And so that could be a flight model issue, but if you sub-target their engines and their backstrafing, don't you think that would help? Or is that just not
You're still going to hit them in the nose, right? Because their nose is in between your guns and their engines. You're still going to hit that if they do that. But
if you hit them at all.
Yeah, if you hit them at all. I mean, that's what we've seen a few times, you know, heck, even at night, right? I mean, people will just run off and it just resets the fight. So we got a lot of flight model changes that need to, especially with SCM Plus, I think that would help. So we'll see what happens with that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers all the combat changes. Kric, did you have anything to add to that, or?
I mean, the only thing like we're talking about with this kind of thing is that I feel like, you know, the one change that they kind of needed to make with combat is that, I mean, I'm kind of speaking from the perspective of some people that, you know, like there's certain ships that we can also see that aren't really very viable in combat situations right now. And I think that's kind of a problem as well. One to name is the Hornet. I think is a great example because it's too slow and clunky and sometimes the powers don't work on it. But, you know, I think also another thing that I think is more viable too is that, you know, all ships kind of have that certain play style, but also that certain type of, you can actually be competitive with it, which I think it's kind of hard to say that with ships like the Hornet right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, if you're talking about just the Hornet, then definitely. I think the Super Hornet still has shield holes, though, right?
Correct.
But the Hornet itself just seems really lackluster, and I don't even think that's a result of the Super Hornet being better than it. It's just not very good for its class, right?
Exactly. It's just not. It just gets outperformed by absolutely everything. It's like, why would you ever, you know?
Right. Like it's a medium fighter. So is the Saber, right?
Exactly.
Where does the Hornet compete with the Saber at anything? It doesn't, right? I mean, in my opinion, anyway.
It's got more guns. I mean, right? It's got one additional size 2 gun, which can help. I mean, that's another 300 some DPS. But the question is, you know, if you're going to fight a Saber and a Hornet, you have to be running ballistics and try and kill them through penetration because you're not going to get through that shield.
Right. So do you think 2 equally skilled pilots, like in a Hornet and a Saber, do you think the Hornet has a chance to realistically win that fight?
I do, if it's not a Super Hornet. If it's like a Wildfire, potentially.
Right. Yeah. I'm not talking about Super Hornets here because the shield hole obviously makes it.
But yeah, I mean, a regular Hornet definitely potentially could take out a Saber, but it's got to have its A game. It's got to be having shields all the way to the front and literally trying to melt the Saber from the inside with those ballistic penetration.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on from combat changes. There isn't really a whole shitload of things that changed with this patch, and yeah. So we want to talk about the new player experience a little bit. Kric, this was kind of your topic. You said there was, or at least we talked a little bit about problems with starter ships, the guide system, just having server issues, and ship sales are kind of all things that impact the new player experience. Think for a second, I guess the problems with starter ships, what do you think those are, Kric?
I think actually a big part of it is that we talked about, you know, them adding, you know, some of the core features of ships like earlier in this thing, when we were talking about, you know, the Vanguard and all the rest of that stuff. And we can kind of go back to that a little bit there because a lot of the components in in those starter ships are actually missing. And what it is it's actually hurting a lot of the people that, you know, buy the $45 Aurora or Mustang and, you know, thinks, oh, I can putt around, I can, collect some of my boxes, and I can kind of do some of those kind of things. Without some of those core features, it really is preventing people from, really actually having a fun experience, but also, kind of enjoying some of the missions and some of the PvE aspects of Star Citizen as well, because I think it's the Mustang. I forget which Mustang it is, but one of them doesn't have any compartment for that box. So you'll accept the mission, you'll grab the box, then you'll walk around with the box, and you're gonna be like, well, where do I put it? And you're gonna realize you have no place to put it, so you're just gonna have to leave it and abandon the mission. And that's kind of a really bad thing, that core feature is kind of missing there. And I think especially with you're trying to get someone introduced into the game. I mean, just from a standpoint of trying to kind of get people introduced into this game, I almost never go with the starter ships. Like, I feel like if I were to introduce somebody to the game, you're going to show them like big ships like the Hammerhead, or you're going to show them, like massive fighters like the Vanguard. You're going to show them kind of the really cool aspects, or the really unique aspects of what really makes this game special. And I just think that the starter ships are lacking so much in development, and just the way how they kind of compete with other ships, that it really is starting to become a problem with like whether or not that $45 package is even really worth it.
Right. Yeah, I don't personally. I don't think the $45 starter packs are worth it at all. There's no reason for me to go and get into a Mustang and Aurora, because as soon as I get into the Mustang or the Aurora, anything can just look at me and I'll die.
Correct.
See, but that's the difference, right? Like the idea that a $45 starter pack or a ship can go toe to toe with a lot of stuff is probably the issue here, right? I mean, a $45 ship is really just to get you into the game. Yeah. You do the shittiest things you can do. Pick up box, do this, do that. I've seen a lot of people do some of these sort of hero to zero to hero or kind of stuff. And people have proven that you can take a crappy ship and trade yourself up to a better ship without putting yourself into too much of a into too much danger, I guess, right? Mm-hmm. So you can do very basic missions, even with an Aurora MR or whatever. You can do some basic missions and still be kind of mildly effective. The idea that you've got to spend $100. Like a while ago, you used to have to spend a shit ton of money to get yourself to a point where you get an effective ship. But now with the idea of trading and buying ships in game and renting ships in game, that's sort of something that's been taken away, I guess, that has equalized, if you know what I mean. So Take your $45 package, turn it into a $100 package, $100 ship within a reasonable amount of time. So, I mean,
the one thing.
Sorry, go.
The one thing I noticed is, we had talked about this earlier in that Star Citizen Live. They talked about how they're going to potentially make fixed viable, right? A lot of these smaller starter ships, they're using size 1 auto gimbaled weapons, and the profit per hour is kind of slower with that. And if they can make fixed viable, these players can put on size 2 weapons, and their earnings per hour should dramatically improve.
Exactly.
And then they can get into that next ship hopefully quicker.
So, and I wonder, like, so that makes sense, right? Like, okay, it's the starter ship, so you start out in it, but I think there's a couple of things here, right? One is that they're not implemented properly, like they don't have all their systems working and things like Kric was saying, and so that can be kind of a turnoff for a brand new player to, why isn't the starter ship a fully functioning, like, this thing always works, right?
That's the doorway into the game, so it should definitely work.
Right. And I think the other thing too is that these starter ships, the only thing, and this is from my experience, the only thing the starter ships actually did for me was I got into the game, I realized how fucking bad that my Mustang was, and I went, okay, so the game's not $45, I have to spend more, right?
Yep.
Now, granted, this was 4 years ago, so now it's a little bit different, but I think the general idea of like, oh, okay, you kind of feel lied to, right? That, oh, you can jump in and enjoy this game on $45, right? And I'm not saying like the community's lying or anything, because I don't think anyone's saying that a Mustang is gonna get you through the game and you're gonna enjoy being in that ship. But just the way they advertise it, right? Like, oh, here's the starter packs, and they're the first thing you see when you want to pledge and everything. And I think
You really, I mean, you kind of look at those other two starter ships. You know, they had Aurora and Mustang, and it's like meh. And then you look at the Reliant core, and it's just a dramatic. It's like, what is the purpose of these other two ships when you look at the Reliant core? It just blows it out of the water.
right.
Yep.
And I'm of the belief, and this is probably a little bit controversial, then again, what isn't in Star Citizen, that there should be different starter ships that they're advertising for more, and I think that these ships should be a little bit cheaper than what they are now. I think those ships would be the Gladius and the Cutlass, right? The Cutlass Black specifically. I understand that these ships, like, people paid lots of money for them and everything, and I understand how viable they are in the game, but I think that's part of the point, right? If I go buy a starter pack, and I think maybe both of those ships should be worth $80 included in the game, right? So you get the game, you get your Squadron 42, and you get a Gladius or a Cutlass for $80, because those two ships will complete almost every gameplay loop in the game right now, aside from mining. And those two ships are competitive for pretty much everything you want to do. Nobody's going to get into a Gladius the first time and be like, shit, this thing sucks. Nobody's going to get into a Cutlass the first time and be like, damn, yeah, this thing just wasn't worth it, right? And
maybe that's just the way they market these things, as opposed to the functionality of the ships. I think an Aurora is an Aurora, right? It's a low-end ship, and it should be low-end. And for $45, that's what you get. But they make it out like you look at the commercials, you look at everything, and it's like, holy shit, this thing's amazing, right?
Yeah.
So you just you jump onto some streamers things, and everyone asks, what kind of a ship should I buy? And the first thing, people never heard anybody in recent times saying that Aurora is the ship to buy.
No, you're right. It's not.
No one's ever said that in recent times. It's always what's its name? An Avenger Titan, which is probably like right now the pick of the crop as far as what you should be buying as far as ships go. So that's what, $80, $70 or something?
Right. I think it's 65.
$65, right? So there's your real entry for something that's sort of like, middle of the road, got a bit of combat capabilities, but still carries a reasonable amount of cargo. So
I guess what I would propose for that, and Kric, I kind of want you to speak on this afterwards. Instead of having, these two basically useless ships be on the front page and just be like, here's your starter packs. Do you think it would be beneficial to have, okay, so we have the $45 starter packs. That's not a big deal. But they also need to put on there and make it very obvious that, okay, now we have say the Tana and the Reliant Core, and the Avenger Titan at like, say, $60 starter packs, and then say the Gladius and the Cutlass as like $80 starter packs, where you can see like, okay, there's 3 different tiers to pledging, right? And obviously these two $45 packs aren't going to be as great, but if I want to test the game out and see what it's like, I can just settle with $45. But if I really want to take it seriously, or I'm really interested, I can go all the way up to the Avenger, the Reliant, or or the Cutlass or the Gladiator or the Gladius without feeling like I'm spending hundreds of dollars on a game that's not even out yet.
I think that's kind of the way we've kind of been doing it. I mean, you just said it there, Reyne, that when you first launched the game, you spawned the Mustang, you flew it around for a little bit, you realized, oh, this isn't a great ship, and so you probably went to the website, got a ship upgrade, and got a different ship right after that. So I think you're kind of touching on something that they're already kind of doing in some way, because even though like they're not necessarily doing it per se with like the fact that they're saying that these are 3 tiers of starter ships, there's still the function of like, oh, like I'm gonna put the 45 in, just see what this game has to offer, and then once you kind of fly it around, you see like, oh, like this ship really doesn't have very much in it. The goal is then to see what ship really is viable then, so that you can actually get the full experience. I feel like when you look at the $45, it's almost like you're spending the $45 to almost get like a demonstration of what you could be doing in the verse. It's almost like look at all these other people doing all these kind of things. You can kind of see all these other ships. You get access to the game, which I think is a huge part of it. And once you kind of get access to the game, you kind of see what's going on, just kind of see kind of the way the game works. I think overall they're just going to make the ship upgrade to something like the Gladius or something like the Avenger or something like that.
Right. Okay. Does anyone else want to speak on that?
No, I think we said most of what we have to about it. It's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah, it's pretty obvious.
Okay, that's fair. Moving on to the guide system. Kric, I think you're the only guide here. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys.
I think I'm a guide, but it's just there's issues with it, I think, that kind of limit my involvement.
Right.
Yeah, and I like, for me, it's kind of funny because I've had my guide system on, and I've been basically using it throughout the last couple of like weeks or so, and like almost like I get maybe like 1 or 2 like every now and then a week, and then but like it's like one of those things where like if I start the thing off, I get to the message correctly, which expires after a certain period of time. Then there's also that period of you don't know whether or not person is actually on the other end or not, because I've had a lot of the experience where it's like you get into the Spectrum thing, everything's working, everything's going well, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, those things kind of don't work. With the latest kind of update, they've kind of made it a little bit better for my thing, but I still don't like the timer. I think that 10-minute timer to respond, that's really a big bug for me.
Yeah.
Can I ask a dumb question? What is the guide system? I know people like so a lot of people like talk about it, and you guys have been working on it. I mean, had a look at it. For people who don't know what the guide system is, what is the guide system?
That's actually a really good question. So for most of the vets that are kind of in the game, that kind of they know their way around the game, or they know their way around certain traits in the game. You can be proficient at certain things, and you can basically put yourself out there as a guide to newer players. And so newer players can go into Spectrum, and they can see, like, for me, I'm in FPS, so like if they wanted help in Star Marine, or if they needed help in one of those kind of things, they could go to the FPS section. They could see that I'm there and that I'm available, which you have to make sure you turn it on to make sure everyone knows that you're available to actually be a guide. And then once they make the connection of, oh, I want to have him be my guide for however long you want to do it, because they time you in like this chat. But I feel like whenever that chat pops up, it always just ends up with me, sending them a Discord link and getting them in the Discord. It never, like, it's so outside of Spectrum. I feel like the guide system, it's a very good tool, I think, for newer players. It's even advertised on the free flight for this week. So with Invictus new free flight, they allowed newer players to join the game, and it was actually like one of those things where they said, like, if you need help getting to Area 18, it would be good to get a guide to almost show you the basics to getting to Area 18.
Right. Okay, so it's like a buddy system, right? So you're
Exactly.
a new player, you need someone to help you, work out what FPS is or what flight systems are. You're basically trying to you have a tool that you can use. Okay, that's kind of neat. And I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the idea of the guide system, and I think just the fact that it's been implemented is a huge improvement, right? I would have loved to have the guide system in the game when I first started, right? Back in 2016, I had no fucking clue what I was doing. But I think there is some problems with it, and I'm not a guide, so I don't actually experience those things, but I hear people complain about them consistently. So
I mean, my big issue with the guide system is, one, it actually keeps turning off on combat. For example, I'll look at my guide system, and after a while, it just will switch to new player experience or whatever the first option is. It will turn off the combat or vehicle combat experience, whatever that tag for guiding is. But the other issue is, it would be nice if we could put more information on who we are as a group or as a guide, so that they can click on references. They can join us in Discord. And I think a lot of it's the fact that they kind of want RSI and Spectrum to kind of be the hub, but it's just not a good place to actually get, because we need to be able to talk to people. We need to be able to interact with them. And it's a lot easier to do that on maybe something like Discord than it is, on Spectrum. I mean, Spectrum's just not a good place. And the fact that we've got that stupid timer, yeah, I mean, the timer's got to go.
The timer, from what I've heard, the timer is like it disconnects you with the person after the timer expires, and then you have no way to message them back ever again after that.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I mean, we need to be able to message them, and maybe what happens is they click on us, it opens a private message, and the first thing that pops up on that private message to us is, whatever our bio is, right? They can see the bio. If we've got any links in the bio, they can click on them. That would be so much better than just the current system.
Yeah.
I think another thing too is that, they just implemented Spectrum as the friends list for this game, and I think it would do justice to kind of, add the guide system as something that kind of comes up in the notifications window in the game itself. I feel like if you have the guide system on and somebody sends you a guide request, even if you're in the game, which is what most people are doing, if they're going to be on, they have the guide on, they're going to be in game, maybe doing something. It'll be in Discord or something else like that. But you want to make it as easy as possible, because, I think there's also the other thing is that once you accept the guide request and, you get in contact with them, there's the whole point of like you adding everybody up, which you do on the website. But I feel like the adding up and everything else like that should be done in game. Like having it in the Spectrum website is, I think, still in that stage of being very primitive. I think the next stage is to kind of get the guide system to an implementation that can be added, so that once you accept a guide request, it shows up actually in the main menu itself, so that you can join.
Yeah, you can see it in game. Hey, you've got a guide request. I'm on. I'd be glad to help somebody, but I'm alt tabbed. I'm not going to constantly alt tab my game to check.
I think that's been a complaint of I think Kric only have one monitor, but Noman has complained to me about it, that his his single monitor setup, right? Like he has to keep alt tabbing to keep himself active in the guide system and also to check, right? Which just doesn't feel right at all. Do you guys think that the guide system should be implemented like directly into the game completely, where you can search for a guide in the game?
I mean, I'm fine with both, but it's just we need to get that timer removed. We need to be able to get notifications of it in game if we got it turned on.
Yeah,
and be able to maybe message in game too. You know, I don't think it's that hard to put a message system in game, but I'm not a developer, so
right. Yeah. I don't want to comment on how difficult or whatever that might be, but I think that it would be good, right? And is much needed. I think there's definitely other problems with the new player experience too. Kric, you mentioned sales. I kind of want to go into that. We just had one, and how do you think that affects new players or people that want to start playing the game?
I think it's almost overwhelmed for a lot of newer players. I think when they see these sales, I think they see like the amount of, they see the dollar amount on almost every single piece of equipment in this game. And I think when you look at that, you look and you go, you're like, oh my God, how am I going to be able to farm all of this stuff to be like that guy in the verse? And I think it's kind of one of those things where, for most people that have been in the game forever, they've either, basically they've got those ships, or they have a plan to kind of get those ships at some point in game. But I think for the newer player to almost see a vast kind of thing, it's cool, but it's also not something that we necessarily want, because I think it could be seen as similar to some sort of like a negative thing. I think if you see too much, you may overwhelm the players.
Right. From my perspective, and my perspective is a little bit different. And it goes back to, just the starter packs and everything. It just looks like, oh, here's our sale and the Invictus launch week, and we have a free fly weekend at the same fucking time. And there's so much going on, and a new player jumps in and they see, maybe they jump in Discord with us, and they just hear everybody talking about like, oh yeah, I just spent $800 on a ship. And I think for a lot of new players, they're like I'm not going to spend that kind of money on this game. Like, and it seems like that's kind of what the whole community is all about, right? That can in and of itself be a turnoff. And obviously, like when we're in Discord and somebody says something like that, the automatic response is, hey, you don't have to do that to enjoy the game. Don't worry about spending $1,000 or how much money anyone else has spent. And I had this experience myself with Mute, because he me and him would talk a whole lot, and he's pretty new, and he's talking about like, oh, do I want to get the constellation and all this stuff, and he kept mentioning like, oh, well, all you guys with all your ships and everything, and he's like, well, that's easier for you to say when you have all this money in the game. And I'm actually one of the people that is the opposite of that. I don't really have a whole lot of money in the game, and the money that I have spent in the game has been over the course of the last 4 years. So it's kind of like I'm like, dude, you don't have to worry about it. It's not a big deal. You don't need to spend hundreds of dollars to have fun, right? Like for me, I bought a Gladius, and I put that thing to work, man. I have hundreds of hours in my Gladius. That's worth the $90 for me, right?
Yep.
So I don't know, and that can translate to the Cutlass Black or whatever ship you enjoy flying or think you'll enjoy flying, right? But just outside of that perspective, if you don't have somebody to tell them that, then it can just be really daunting, in my opinion.
Exactly, and I think like the fact that the UEC system right now, or the AUEC system, is somewhat like, it's very grindy to get to that stage of like, getting rentals and doing everything else like that. I think it also links back to the fact that, the rentals and ship pricings and everything else like that need to get flushed out just as much as the ships themselves need to get flushed out, because you need to create an economy that's going to encourage people to buy certain ships. And you don't want people to have it easy and be able to buy the Javelin with an hour's worth of farm, but you also don't want it to be where it's like 3 or 4 weeks of basically farming for a new Gladius. That's kind of also the other thing too.
Yeah, especially when I'm gonna say these two words together, and I don't want anyone to get triggered, but persistence problems. And this goes back to
oh my god.
Oh no.
Persistence problems, and this kind of leads into the server issues that we have, right?
Wipe it.
But the server issues that we have go back to that, and it's like, how are you supposed to deal with that when a new player jumps in? They're like, oh, okay, I can buy this ship in the game. It's not a big deal with AUEC. And it's like, yeah, but don't worry, you're going to reset your character every 24 hours anyway, because like the server keeps crashing, you keep getting bugs, and they're unfixable.
Well, that's a huge problem. I think like what I've seen is like almost periodically throughout the Invictus week itself, almost every time that they switch from like event to event to event. So like we had, I think, RSI, Tumbril, and Origin to start. And then once they switched it to Anvil and they switched all the free flights around, like the servers kind of like basically were terrible for that first day. And so like I feel like even, and then it kind of continued with Aegis, and it kind of continued all the way through. That's kind of very problematic, especially for the newer players that they're coming in, they see that it's a free flight weekend. They can, essentially try out all the ships they want for free. And, where they're supposed to get 2 days to try it out. Even the community, for some of the backers that don't have a lot of money in the game and are looking to, maybe get a Hornet or getting a Saber or getting some other ship, and they're looking to just test out and see what they like. They got one less day almost on every other sale but RSI, Tumbril, and Origin, because of the fact that the servers tanked day one each I think you would call it like a transition day. So like from like RSI, Tumbril, and Origin to Anvil, that day the servers were basically unplayable.
Right.
I think this is kind of like, being a backer for quite a few years. I think this is probably one of the worst sets of recurring issues they've had around a sale time. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, there's probably someone's going to point out something, but literally on cue, like you said, Kric, every time, again, we're just watching people's streams. Most folks struggle on the day of that new sale, that transition period. And you can imagine sitting there streaming the game to hundreds or thousands of people. I mean, lots of big streamers now, lots of new players watching those streamers. And the first thing they see is 16K error, 10K error, whatever. And then people turning around and basically going to the server status page, and it says some, cheesy message like, we've experienced some degradation on, some server. And it's like, holy shit. I mean, but, lots of players are affected, but for whatever reason, their sales are defying gravity as a result.
Yeah, I don't understand that, but
mind
you're
blowing.
correct.
Like April to May, I think they made $9 million more in May around this time than they have, in April. And it's just like, dudes, man, imagine when they get everything right, how much money this game's going to make, right? If every new backer walked in there and the experience was just on point, they'd just be queuing up at the doors to fricking buy their JPG spaceships. It's going to be fricking insane if they ever get it right.
Oh, yeah.
If and when, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Golo, how do you feel about the server issues?
I mean, I have. I think a lot of people have been really frustrated with it. We've brought in quite a few new members, and their play experiences crash, or they can't get in, or there's just 30Ks. You get, especially with the prison system. You put all this time and energy into setting something up, and then at 30Ks, it's just like we need to be able to have a really nice, quick enjoyment of combat to some extent without that happening. I mean, I feel bad for the traders. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I don't do trading. I've just started doing mining. Is like I would be super pissed to put all this time and energy into something and then it's gone simply because of a 30K.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they need to come up with some better way of persistence to kind of counter that. It probably wouldn't be so bad. But, from a lot of people that I've talked to, the general agreement from most people I've talked to is they just need to wipe. Sure, it's not fun getting all your stuff over again, but at this point, like, the servers need a wipe. They really do.
Yep.
Some people that have got millions of, alpha UEC are saying, reset it. It's bad. It's that.
I mean, the fact that we're resetting accounts literally every other day,
yep,
is an indication of something definitely wrong in the system right now. Like it's I don't ever remember. I mean, look, as we add more to the system, yes, things get more complicated. But right now, server I'm resetting once a week, once every couple of weeks. So this is database issues. There's desync, there's database. I mean, the desync yesterday was like absolutely insane. It's and then you couple that with there's a really good chance when you log in, you're not going to see your character, or you're not going to do this. There's a lot of game breaking or game impacting issues right now that are just making that new or existing user experience less than ideal. Shit, basically, right? Crap. It's the only way to put it without being too gross.
I think it's also fair to also say though, to kind of play devil's advocate here a little bit though, we did have the Invictus flight week this week, so it was a free flight event. So you didn't have to pay to really get into the game, so anyone could sign up with an account, download the game, and start playing. So I think it also didn't. I think it was also one of those things where I think it was kind of a good move because it's almost like how far can these servers really go and what's going to happen when they get overburdened? Because when you make a game free and everyone's like, oh, I want to see what the progress is on this game, and everyone logs in and is playing around with everything, spawning ships and stuff like that, of course the servers are going to they're going to be handling a lot more load than they normally do. And I think it's kind of a testament to say that SIG is at least trying to experiment with how much their servers can really take, because they did. I mean, the amount they did do with Invictus. I mean, we saw the Javelin, the Idris, the F8, the F7A. We saw that whole thing that happened, outside all the ports on Hursted, Microtech, ArcCorp. You saw the convention center, plus the flight week, plus them transitioning over the free flights. I mean, a lot was going on for that behind the scenes. So, I think it was also kind of a testament to the fact that where we may not have seen these issues in previous years, I think there was a lot more going on behind the scenes than in previous years.
For sure. For sure.
I think I noticed too, because when we were in 3.9.0, I mean, it was horrible, right? And when we got the PTU for 3.9.1, it seemed to have just fixed almost all the problems that we were having as far as persistence problems and just a bunch of other things, right? Server crashes and things like that. The game felt a lot more stable. I was getting better frame rates in the PTU for 3.9.1, and I think you're right, Kric. There was a whole lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that weren't in the PTU, and as soon as we got 3.9.1 active in the game, they start doing launch week free flight, and this huge in-game event that I think is probably the reason for all of these problems. And I think now that the event's over, we'll probably see a lot more stability. I mean, I've noticed more stability already, right? But I don't know. I think in regards to the new player experience, though, that still is kind of bad because it's hard to get these new players, and we've seen plenty of them over the course of this week, to come in and just like sort of like bash their head against a wall until they get in and enjoy the game, right? Because it kind of feels like you have to do that.
Of course, and I think it was kind of one of those things where I think in previous years, I think like free flight, it was like maybe a couple of buddies and everything else that kind of got in, like, you know, certain, like the servers were definitely filled during those times. But I think that this event overall, I think especially with the idea that they were showing up big cap ships and everyone was kind of just interested to see them, I think they drew in a much bigger crowd than in previous years as well. Especially since it seems like from the people that have kind of joined, the people that have been active in game, it just seems like there was a lot more people just in the game all at one time. Now, of course, you know, they've put it on the roadmap. You know, there's a lot of server-side stuff that's going to be coming in the future patches. We know a lot of stuff's in the works for that. But at its current moment, we just kind of see the primitiveness of, you know, where their servers are at the current moment.
Right. I think that kind of sums up everything we wanted to talk about today. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to add, or?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, this has been the Renegade Squadron podcast. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week.